All right, so to wrap up chapter 7, we're going to go through the remaining parts. Starting with this issue of job analysis, actually, we mentioned this in one of the last chapters on management, where it's important to study jobs and find out exactly what each job is doing in the scheme of things. And so you can go ahead and design um, work and then start knowing who you need to do certain work. So everything sort of starts with this job analysis. But basically, once it comes down to understanding that you need a particular position created to do certain functions, two things have to happen. Number one is you are going to put together a job description. Job description should be a list of the things that that job does. Usually, it's the first thing that you see is the most time that you'll be spending doing on the job. So if you look at a job description and the first thing is, greeting customers and taking orders, well, that's going to be, I would say, 75, 80% of your job is going to be dealing with that. And then the list goes on to smaller pieces of the job, but the description should always start with what you're doing the most of. And then what you're going to have are what we call job specs, job specifications. What qualifications does a person need to perform that job, right? And this is where it kind of gets interesting because you need a certain amount of education, you might need a certain amount of work experience. You might need certain technical skills or other demonstrated skills, maybe in management, maybe in other types of areas, manufacturing and things like this, depending on the job. So here is an example, figure 9.1 here, showing that this company has a job description for, in this case, it's the Georgia sales coordinator for this company in the college sales department, reporting to the regional manager. And then the brief summary of the job just gives you that idea of this is what you're going to be doing. Okay. And then these are the principal activities. So this first one here, you're going to be doing the most. Supervise, manage, train, uh, the sales representatives in Atlanta, right? That's going to be the biggest part of your job. This should be the second biggest part, right? And then as the list goes on, these are things you could be doing, but you're not going to be doing them as frequently as the ones at the top of the list. That's really going to be very, very important. And then what you have is job specifications, the type of knowledge, previous experience, education, other types of things that are necessary in order to do this job well. Okay. One thing we are going to be talking about is in the gray box here, the concept of being either exempt or non-exempt and what this means. We're going to get to when we talk about compensation in a moment. So now that you've designed the jobs, you've analyzed it, you designed it, you have a description, you have a job title, you have a job description, you know the qualifications you need. How do you get these folks, right? How do you start attracting people to apply to do those jobs? That's really the recruiting part. Okay. And there's internal recruiting and there's external recruiting. And so internal is basically this idea of promoting from within. There are people already in the company who can step up and do the job. And so that should be looked at first. In some cases, it's really better to bring someone on the outside of the company in, particularly if you're looking to accomplish certain things that folks inside haven't been able to do. So you kind of need sort of that new direction, new leadership, and so sometimes recruiting outside is better. So this is how they look at it. So again, external recruiting is your applicants are from outside of the company. And they can really run the gamut, open house, college campus recruitments, recommendations from current employees, posting it in job boards, employment agencies, etc. Uh, One of the biggest advantages is you do get that new perspective, and from folks who are not part of the firm. Maybe they've worked for competitors and they kind of have an understanding of how that works and can bring that to your company as an advantage, right? Um, One of the disadvantages is, of course, these folks, it takes a while to find them and recruit them. And you're going to have to convince them to maybe jump from the company that they're in now to your company. So oftentimes it can be expensive. And if you don't pick a really good person to do it, uh, and there's someone on the inside who kind of knows what they're doing, it might end up provoking resentment from within, and that sometimes can backfire big time. Internal recruiting simply is looking at your present employee pool and seeing who actually has those qualifications and experience for the available positions that are there. So again, some companies, this is their whole mantra. UPS is strictly recruits from within. They don't bring anybody outside for management jobs. Everyone who's been a manager, has a manager there, a supervisor, has done the job that they're supervising. So that's just part of their particular philosophy of how they do it. Well, it does provide a strong motivation for current employees to work hard because they know there's promotional opportunities available. And of course, you can, keep people there longer, which helps you retain good people from leaving because they have those opportunities to grow, and that's part of what they do. Of course, the disadvantage, if you move one person from one position to another, now you got the other position to fill. So part of it is it's six of one, half dozen of the other to some degree, um, but it really sort of depends on how that goes. And so you're going to have a recruiting effort anyway to fill whatever job is left open. A lot of people apply. How do you get selected? Right. So once you know the information about applicants, how do you choose? How do you choose? And part of that, that's a process in and of itself because you don't want to screw up. You want to make sure your process is thorough enough where you're going to look at everybody clearly and you're going to bring the person in that's best for you. So certainly applications provide certain information. Interviewing is very important. This is where in essence, you're supposed to prove that you can actually help the company. You are supposed to prove through an interview that you actually have that education, that skill set, that experience to help the company. And of course, as I mentioned last class, you need to be someone who comes across as, someone people want to work with, right? You don't want to come across as someone who's like, well, this person's going to be very difficult to work with, less likely to get the job in that regard. References are a mixed bag, but it certainly does provide some information. You can do assessment. You can also look at social networking sites to see a little bit more about that particular background. Again, anywhere you can obtain information. And yes, social media is game. So if you don't think that your potential employers are looking at all the things you've posted online, think again. It is something that will be looked, which is why you never ever post anything online that's going to come back to haunt you. Right. And so just be really, really careful about that. If what you have is a bunch of ranting and raving, you have inappropriate pictures or other types of things, you're just killing your image and you're killing your opportunities to potentially get good jobs. So keep it professional, even though it is a social media site. It's looked at. One of the biggest things I hear from employers, and I've been teaching since 1994, So in that 26-year period, what I've been hearing about over and over again is how poorly employment applications are filled out. And I think one of the other things that a lot of applicants don't know is how important it is to fill this out well and it's thorough. Because if you do a real shitty job with your employment application, that simply reflects on that's information about you. Oh, this person doesn't really care. They didn't even put their address, or they scribbled this in. They don't really care. I know that it's a pain to fill out form after form after form, whether it's in person with a pen and paper, or whether it's online when you're typing that stuff in. Be thorough. It's a reflection of you. You're giving information about yourself to the potential employer. And if you just, ditto, if you just like for your job duties, yeah, I did this, did that, ditto, 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 whatever. You don't really put down stuff. It just speaks volumes, really, about well, this person just isn't really detailed, and they don't really are. They're not very thorough. They're not very detailed. Yet they're applying for a job that I need someone who's detailed. I need someone who's thorough. And the application is just telling me that they're not that type of a person. So just understand the application is important. And anytime you do go for work, fill this out appropriately. Okay. And make sure you're doing a good job. Um, Certainly after they've selected you, they'll give you a job offer. It usually comes with it's a formality, and so once you agree to that offer, you've agreed to the job duties, the compensation, etc. They'll bring you on board. So as soon as you join the firm, you're going to go through a process of learning how that company works. That's orientation. Okay. And so orientation topics are really about anything and everything. So this is where the bathrooms are. This is where the cafeteria is. This is how we do things here. Um, it's a broad thing, but it just basically introduces you and orientates you to how things are done in that company and where things are and who's who. Compensation is a big issue for a lot of people. Unfortunately, they look at one aspect of it. A lot of people just look at the actual dollar amount that they're getting paid, and that's actually just one part of compensation. What is very, very important is also all the benefits that go along with it. So they might not give you a lot of monetary compensation, but maybe all the benefits that they provide you may be well worthwhile versus another offer where they might give you a much higher figure, a much higher number to come in for monetary compensation, but they just don't provide you with many other benefits that you need. So compensation is a broad issue. There's whole courses on it in upper level college and graduate school. Um, it's a big, big issue. But basically, it's all about what the employee receives in return for their labor. Okay. So you want a high compensation level, you're going to have to go ahead and convince the employer that you are valuable to them, you know, that your labor is going for them is going to be in their benefit. They're going to benefit from you, and thus you're worth the extra money. You're worth the extra benefit, things like that. So, effective compensation systems are a little bit different because, you know, uh, it's kind of a separate type of thing. There's wage levels. There's the structure of wages throughout the company, and then the individual wage might differ as well. So these are things that are talked about. Um, Wage level, basically, what is the general pay level relative to pay levels at other companies? So, in that sense, a lot of companies will use wage surveys. They collect data of what other companies are paying for the same job. so they understand what type of wage level that the job is at. Another thing is they have to decide on what pay levels are going to be given for all the positions within a company, from the low to the mid to the upper echelons of work and positions. What are the pay levels each? Okay. Oftentimes it's a process of evaluating how important that job is to the company. Clearly, just to make this clear, um, the companies rely on managers to organize, get all those types of things done on behalf of the owners. So to the owners, the management is really important. And so management tends to get compensated because their relative worth, particularly to the owners, the stockholders, is very, very high. Because if the management plans and organizes and executes their things well, they're going to make a lot of money. Of course, managers by themselves don't get everything done. You need a workforce, you need employees. And so then the process is, okay, so, what is the value of that particular job within the whole structure of what we're getting done? And some positions are going to be a little bit lower in value than others. And so you're going to have different wage structures. And finally, what they end up determining what you as an individual will receive is going to be sort of combinations of all of those. Okay. There's an issue, something called comparable worth. Okay. So this is a concept that looks at equal compensation for what they call equal pay for equal work, right? So if the job requires the same level of education, the same level of training, the same level of experience, the same level of skills, why do people get paid differently? Why aren't they worth the same, right? And so that's a good question. This is an issue, and it's that way because managers bring people in at different wages based on what's happening in the economy. So if last year there were very, very few workers available to do the job, to attract people, you probably would pay higher wages. And so you would bring certain people in at a higher wage because a lot of people are not available. But look what's happened. We've had a recession. A lot of people are unemployed, a lot of people looking for work. So there's a lot more people looking for work. Thus, there's a lot more people who would take the job at a lower pay. So even though it's the same job and everyone has the same basic level of education and skill, there's going to be differences in pay simply in my example, simply because of when they were hired and the economic conditions that they came in. Should that happen or not? Well, that's part of the issue of comparable work. Right? So companies have taken steps to address this. For example, a lot of companies, Amazon, Apple, et cetera, these folks down here, they have disclosed the results of the differences in employee pay at different job levels to say, actually, there's really not much of a pay gap here. We're doing a pretty good job. In other words, we see everyone as equal who are doing this type of job, and so they're getting paid equally. And again, there's lots of reasons for differences in compensation. You might have more experience, you might have more education, so you might be coming in. They might want to offer you a little bit more to get you there. So it's all it's systematic when you look at it as a big picture, but how it actually gets there is individual. The individual managers are hiring individuals at different rates depending on who they are and what time of the economic cycle it is, et cetera. So there's natural discrepancies in pay just for that. So compensation, this is the issue that I mentioned earlier. There are two different types of workers, basically, even though there's many forms of compensation here. For legally, there's only two. You're either exempt or you're non-exempt. And under the law, what that means is employees are non-exempt from a 40-hour work week and overtime, which means that you are high if you're hired as a hourly wage worker. In other words, when they gave you the job offer, they said, we're going to hire you for this job and we're going to pay you $20 per hour. That's how you were hired, on a rate per hour basis. Guess what? You are not exempt from the law, which means all the labor laws that were passed way back in the 30s, setting a standard 40-hour work week and anything over that being time and a half, that applies to you. But there's a lot of folks who are exempt. And what you saw in that other job description was that person coming in would have been exempt. What does exempt mean? Exempt from the law, separate from the law. In other words, an exempt employee is hired on a yearly basis, on a salary. Will hire you for this job as an accountant at $52,000 a year. Well, see, the way I hired you was a yearly salary, not an hourly rate. And so that means that you are exempt from the law. In other words, that salary that they've quoted you is for the whole year, regardless how many hours you work each week. Okay. So just because you work 45 hours one week or 50 hours doesn't mean you're going to get extra pay. No, that's a salaried position. A lot of you are going through college where you're going to be ending up working in salaried positions. You're going to be in exempt positions, which means it doesn't really matter if you're working 40 hours this week or 50 hours this week, you're still getting the same paycheck. Okay. So yeah, that's one of the things they don't really tell you before you start college. But that is what ends up happening to all of us eventually. So exempt and non-exempt is really from the law perspective is you're either hired per hour or you're hired at a salary per year. Okay. There are other types of ways to compensate people. You can pay them on a commission, right? So every time they sell something, they get a piece of that sale. There can be additional incentive pay. So in addition to being paid an hourly rate or a salary, if there's certain benchmarks that are met, they'll get a bonus in essence. That's what incentive pay is like. A lot of people will love to get a salary increase. And it's in this case, a lump sum salary increase is an entire raise given to you all at once. And then, of course, sometimes they tie it to the profitability of the company. The more profitable the company is, they share the profit with the employees. And that's what profit sharing is. Like I said, benefits are very, very important. It's not your actual take home, it's not your pay check. It's all the other stuff that the company is providing you as compensation. Well, like what? Like vacations, like sick days. Those are benefits. Not everybody does those. So the fact that the company is willing to pay you not to work, that's what a vacation is. You're taking a week off, but we're still paying you. We're paying you not to work. Usually that's just totally opposite of what companies feel. It's a business. I pay you to work. So hang on, you want me to pay you for not working? Yes, that's a benefit. Okay. So whether you're not working for the day because you have a sick day and you have sick leave, they're still paying you. Whether you're not working on a holiday because a holiday falls in your regular work schedule, they're still paying you for not working. That's a benefit. And if they pay you for vacations, that means they're paying you not to work for them for that week. That's a benefit. Okay. Surely all the insurances that they provide, they're paying either all of it or a bulk of it. Oftentimes they will take care of things like life insurance as part of your salary. But of course, you are contributing to other types of things, like your health, particularly your health insurance. Some companies have retirement programs like a 401k that you can join. That's an employment-based benefit. You can't have a 401k on your own. You can only have one through an employer benefit. And so that's an employee benefit there. Of course, all employers match your Social Security payment, which is to your benefit, and all employers pay into the unemployment compensation system which means that if in the case that they do have to shut down and lay you off, you'll have the benefit of that as well. There are other types of benefits that are mentioned here, like, tuition reimbursement. They'll help you pay for college. Some might have their own credit union. Some might have affiliations with gyms or their own gym. Some might give very big, deep discounts to in their cafeteria, or in some cases, the cafeteria is for free. They want you to eat there. Some give childcare services on site, what have you. Some companies let the employees decide what benefits they want. So if they're automatically guaranteeing you $1,000 of benefits every month, well, how do you want that $1,000 to be spread around? You want to buy more vacation. You want to, have more life insurance. You want to have other types of things. So it's one of those types of things where it's a flexible benefit plan, where all the benefits still exist. They were going to spend this money on you anyway, but they're giving you a choice of how you want the benefits to be spent for you. Once you bring people on, you need to make sure that there's enough training and development inside, so you can continue to teach them how to do their jobs better. The whole purpose of training and development is just doing the job better. Right? It's not for general development of all this stuff. It's whatever they're doing. They want to see it. They want to see a payback by you being more productive. So there's specific employee training to help you be more efficient or more effective, and how you use their technology, how you get things done. Most of the training and development money is meant for managers. And if you're a manager, there's lots of development opportunities there. And so again, because the better you manage the place, the more profitable it's going to be for the owners. Okay. Okay. So in terms of training and develop, there's some people there's no formal job training. It's just simply on the job. And I think we've all been in one particular job, if you haven't yet, that it's almost like you were thrown into the job and you're kind of on your own to kind of figure it out. That's happened to almost everybody that I've known over the years. It's not supposed to happen that way. They're supposed to at least be orienting you and giving you an idea of how things get done before they release you on your own. And so on-the-job methods are relatively common, and they are effective because you're working with someone who already knows what they're doing. So they are effective most of the time. Sometimes there are simulations. Sometimes there's classroom instruction. Sometimes they send you, or you're required to attend certain seminars and conferences. Sometimes there's some role playing. So you'll be in the position of the employee, they'll be in the position of the customer, and they'll sort of go through various scenarios so you can learn what to do, what not to do. And of course, online learning, what we're doing now has been accelerated quite a bit. Okay. And again, the whole purpose of that training and development is to make people more productive on their jobs. Okay. So once they've been on the job for a while, how are they doing? Well, that's what performance appraisal is all about. Evaluates where the employee is in terms of their performance, and whether they're meeting the standard, whether they're exceeding the standard, which is they're performing better than they expected, or whether they're below the standard, because sometimes people are not reaching that level. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But there's various scenarios, but you have to keep evaluating. And most of the time, most people are evaluated every year. I think it would be a little bit better if it's done well, to have that evaluation process done at least a couple of times a year, because the evaluation process, if it's done very well, helps the employee perform better, helps the employee meet the standards that have been set, and positions them for better raises, for more promotional opportunities, etc. Evaluation is not meant to be punishment. And a lot of people think, well, if I don't do well on this or that, I'm going to be punished. The companies who do that type of thing are doing it wrong. Okay, then that's sort of a power trip rather than the real of the person who's doing the appraisal, rather than the real purpose of the appraisal. Okay. So again, 3 objectives: how you can improve in the future, um, whether you're meeting the standard for what level of raise or potential promotions, right? But believe it or not, it actually helps the organization make sure they're selecting employees properly, they're training employees properly, and they're offering, those types of opportunities and activities to help train people to do the job better. The reason you're hired is to get the job done. I mean, there's no other reason. And so here's an example for a performance appraisal, showing the general expectations and the contributions and the results and strengths and weaknesses and ways in which to get better. Again, the idea, if there are weaknesses, is to put together a plan to make it better. Okay. And that's just something that sort of has to happen quite a bit. There are certain methods that are used. What's the objective methods that you can be using, where you're not actually putting a judgment on people, but are they supposed to be, the units of output? They were supposed to be producing X, and they produced X minus 1. So obviously or maybe they produce X plus 1. So it's above the level. That could be in sales dollars, could be whatever. Okay. And then there are, ways in which we're going to be, in essence, ranking certain things. Some people might get a numerical ranking of how they're doing in different areas, and they need to improve on certain things. But it's basically, it's called a judgment method, because the overall performance of the employee is being, in essence, documented and ranked against everyone else who's doing that job. And then, part of it is, how, and I've mentioned this already, how you give employees feedback. I think it's really, really, really important that's, the goal of it, which means that, this idea of tell and sell is, this is how good or bad you did, and here, sign off on your evaluation, it's done. Not the best approach. A better approach too would be to listen, to find out a little bit about what has gone well, what has gone not so well, what the employee has to say about it, what the employee thinks could have helped, or some of the reasons on that. That's a little bit better. The best approach is, the employee actually rates their own performance along with the manager, and they talk about how to solve problems and get better in the future. That's really the better type of thing. They also have this approach called the 360-degree evaluation. So you're being totally turned around, in essence. So again, this evaluation collects reviews anonymously about an employee from his or her peers, so the coworkers, subordinates, supervisors, and compiles them into a large feedback report. Again, the feedback has to be productive. That's all I can say. And lastly, in this chapter, there's a lot of laws that are on the books affecting human resources and thus affecting management. Okay, as I mentioned, there are labor laws. This particular labor law set the 40-hour work week, set up a minimum wage, and set up overtime for 40 hours a week. So this is where people, when you get hired, you're either going to be non-exempt, which means the law applies to you, or exempt, which means this law does not apply to you. Why doesn't it apply to you? Because you're not an hourly employee. year on salary. Okay. But there's lots of other laws that are on the books. Equal pay in 63 was really about the fact that women were going into the workplace and making large sums of money that were much lower than men for the same job type of thing. So again, the law started slowly. It's still that way. I mean, it's not like the law is going to fix it overnight. It's one of those things where slowly it progresses. Certainly there are discrimination types of issues. We shouldn't be, I mean, everyone has to work. So whenever there's discrimination practiced based on, what gender you are, what race you are, what color you are, what religion you are, or where you're from, or where your heritage is from, because I don't like you because you're from this other country, what have you. This is totally wrong. This is against the law. That's what they said, because everyone has to work. How else are you going to make money in this country? You got to go to work. So discrimination really has no place in that, because it takes away people's ability to earn a living. Certainly, there's a lot of age discrimination even today, although it's changing a lot. But this was back in 67, updated in 1986. And it really is about folks who are 40 and older, and basically saying that, just because they're older doesn't mean that they should be discriminated against. They should be given the same opportunities to get that job as anyone else. A lot of employers prefer younger employees to hire in many cases because they're simply cheaper to hire. And so that's that. But there's a lot of benefits to hiring older people. Older people have a wealth of knowledge they bring to the job. Um, Believe it or not, younger people have a much higher absentee rate than older people. They call out sick because they party, right? Thirsty Thursdays or whatever it's called. They're going out and partying. They're out on Fridays. They might be out on Mondays. That doesn't happen when you're older. So you miss less work. Although if you are very old and you get sick, it might take a toll on you. But in general, there's a lot of benefits for older workers. Of course, the workplace has to be safe. There has, they've updated retirement security. This is geared toward pensions, and created the 401k plan that's become the standard for everybody. Um, if you have to close a plant, this particular act said give employees 60 days notice that you're going to close a factory down, and your layoff is 50 or more employees. So just as a heads up, because sometimes plants close, and there's nothing stopping from a business just closing today and not telling anybody. That just at least gives people a chance to prepare to find other work. Americans with Disabilities Act was really important as well, because again, people with disabilities can be equally productive to everybody else. And so basically this prohibits discrimination against any individual who's qualified but has a disability. And the word disability has expanded, not just physical, where that was the main focus of it at the start, but it's now expanded to include medical and mental related types of issues. Civil Rights Act of 91 really gave more legs to the idea of sexual discrimination, sexual harassment, and legal remedies for those. Employees could now sue and be a little bit more successful than they were in the past. Family Medical Leave Act, just saying that, organizations that are pretty large, 50 or more employees, upon application, they will give you 12 weeks of leave. It is without pay, and it's got to be for something very specific. So either the birth or adoption of a child, or if you as the employee or your spouse or child or parent is seriously ill and you need to be there for them. The Medical Leave Act has had, I mean, it's around now for some time. It's had mixed results. Some employers, they have to give you an equivalent job. So some people take the leave, they come back 12 weeks later, which is 3 months later. And that particular job that they did is not available. They'll get a similar job, but the job's usually not as great. So it doesn't stop the employer from shifting you around, but they just can't fire you for needing time to take care of a sick person or a child or something like this. Of course, the Affordable Care Act, basically known as Obamacare in our society, again, only really applied to organizations for 50 or more employees who have health insurance programs, but they have to allow employees the right to buy the insurance from anybody, okay, any provider, particularly if the organization's insurance is too expensive for the employee to contribute. So that was part of the law that affects HR. So very, very important there. Let me do one more thing with you, as I've always wanted to try this. Let me go to the whiteboard here. Okay, and you'll have to excuse me for using this for a second, but I wanted to go over a few things. You have an employee. I'm going to give you two things. So, and I want you to talk on this. So you have a couple of things. First of all, you have employee performance, and you have employee attitude. That's a little bit of a space. Thankfully, there's two T's. I can fill in the gap. All right. So, and let's talk a little bit about employee A, employee B, employee C, and employee D. So employee A is going to be your most impressive employee. They are performing their job very well. They have a positive job performance, okay? And they have a very positive attitude. So that's the ideal employee. Employee A is ideal. They're performing their job well, and their attitude is incredibly good. It's good for the business. On the other extreme, employee D. Employee D has a negative attitude and a negative job performance. So not only are they not doing their job, but they don't care. So employee D, people like employee D, we simply just terminate. And we don't like to use the word terminate anymore. What do we call it? We're just going to free up their future, right? They're obviously we're in the way. They'd rather be doing something else. So why don't we just say, go ahead, we're going to free your future up. You don't have to come here anymore. Go and do whatever your attitude wants you to do. So they're gone. But that leaves us with a conundrum, which is, who else would you rather work with? Someone whose job performance is very, very good, positive job performance, but their attitude sucks. Or someone whose job performance isn't going well right now, but their attitude is quite good. So let me open it up to you. Who would you rather work with? You're a manager, or whatever. Who would you rather work with? Someone who's like an employee B, positive job performance, they're getting their job done, but their attitude sucks? Or employee C, who isn't performing right now, their job all that well, but has a positive attitude? Open question. Let's see, I got my first little response here. Okay, Colin says C. Elijah says C. Megan says C. Everyone is saying C. I see. Question, why? Why are you saying C?
I feel like if they have a negative attitude, even if their job performance is good, it's not going to give the representation that you want, like for the job. But then also, if like C has a positive attitude, I feel like you can increase his job performance by, because he obviously wants to be there. He obviously has a good attitude. It's better than not having a good attitude and trying to teach someone who doesn't even want to do the thing you're telling them.
I couldn't agree with you more. I would agree that a lot depends on. Well, we got more comments here. So, okay. Uh, no one picked B, which is usually unusual because B, they're at least doing their job. Their job performance is good, but of course, they're very negative to be around. And you probably have worked with people who are like that, right? They do their job, they know how to do their job, but they just have this terrible attitude about work, about life, about everything. And it brings you down. It actually not just brings you down, believe it or not, it brings productivity down. It brings everything down. And you're not at work to be less productive. You're at work to be more productive. That's what the business wants. So having people with negative attitudes is actually not in the business's best interest. The best thing to do is to try to um, legally do whatever you can to either tell them change the attitude, which is very unlikely because you don't control that, they do, or you kind of start documenting things so they have a negative performance. If you have a negative attitude, you're not going to be very you're not very far from having a negative performance because coworkers are going to notice, managers are going to notice, customers are going to notice. Everyone's going to start noticing the attitude and they're going to complain, and that's going to bring everything down. Um, Plus, like I said earlier, again, you control this. Your attitude is your problem. You wake up in the morning and you decide what type of day is it going to be for me? Am I going to have a good attitude today? Am I going to have a bad attitude today? Am I going to want to learn about this today? Am I going to not want to learn about it today? Am I going to show up to class? Am I not going to show up to class? Am I going to do work? Am I not going to do work? Guess what? You have the power to do that. All of that is your decision, right? So a business or anybody else really cannot change your attitude. Only you can. Only you can. But a business might be able to change job performance. Maybe the person is not performing because they're not trained well. Maybe they need further training. So you might send them the training, you might pair them up with a mentor. There's things that the business can actually do to improve job performance. So that's why you're all right. Employee C is a better choice to stick with because there's ways that the business can help improve the job performance. There's nothing the business can do to change someone's attitude, okay? Because you simply just don't have control over that, right? The other person does. All right, so now we're back to our big screen and open for questions, comments, and other types of things. I hope you enjoyed that little extra stuff to cite the fact that I have my little chicken scratch going.